Hi everyone, I'm Bart Smekla. I will be our host for today's meeting. And this meeting is being recorded. At the beginning, I want to remind everyone about our code of conduct, which we can summary as be excellent to each other. And is there anyone who's new here? And maybe something.
I'm Moshe. I'm a little bit newish.
Can you say a few words about yourself?
So I'm mainly active in the SIG cluster lifecycle group, particularly on the image builder, which is kind of what I'm here today to discuss. So this would be the VM image builder, not the container image builder. Yeah.
It's good to see you here. Is there anybody else who is new and want to introduce himself or herself? Okay, so
my name is Amal. I'm working as a software engineer in Ola, just like what Uber is doing. We are providing taxi as a service, and I have around 3 years of experience, and I'm new to k8 open source group.
Yeah. Hi Amal, it's good to see you here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to our recurring topics. Are we planning to do some billing review? The team, I think you are the only one.
I wasn't planning on it, so we did it at the last one.
Okay.
And I figured today would be sparsely attended, so maybe we save it for the next one.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good to me. Okay, so let's move to the action items. Is maybe Linus with you there?
Indeed he is.
Hello.
Hi Linus, can you say something about image promoter?
Yeah, so the main piece that needs to be done is launching, or I should say, creating E2E tests for the auditing mechanism, and then afterwards launching it on prod. And when we do launch it on prod, we need to make sure that if it fails or if it errors out, that permissions are set up on the project such that people or a group is notified about those failures, not just me. So that part can happen at some point in the future. But for now, the exact order of steps that needs to be done is first writing the tests around the auditor, because I've only tested it with my own personal GCP project. So it should work, but if there are any changes to the code, et cetera, we need to make sure that it still works. So that's what's remaining.
Yeah, sounds good.
So close I can smell it.
Yeah, me too. And is there something which we can help you with currently?
It would probably be around the permissions stuff. I'm not really familiar exactly about how that stuff is set up. I mean, other than the scripts that we have in k8s-infra-team's. Is that the only mechanism we have?
Those are the scripts, although there's a PR open to start to terraform that stuff. Take that orthogonally. Is there a group, a role group already that's set up for that you think maps to this? Like we have storage admins. Do you think that's the right role group?
We probably need like a page or group or page.
Well, we still don't have a standardized answer around alerting.
Wait, I thought there was an alerting group email already. Don't we already have one? Because I remember using it for
maybe
adding it.
I didn't think so, but maybe.
Because I added myself to that group in a PR.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know what the group does then.
I think that it's a good point to the action item to check to confirm if it's working. If not,
but is that stuff done, like the Terraform stuff? Is Christoph doing that, or
no? Somebody else sent me a PR. Ignore the Terraform stuff for now, because I'm sure that will take some iterations while we convert the scripts over into that. most, I guess I would say, go look at groups YAML, find all of the role, we didn't call them role, but they basically are role groups. See if you think one of them maps to this group. It's sort of not the alerting group now, the who's going to administer the auditor, right?
Right. Okay.
I don't know if we need a separate one for container registry or if that should just fall under storage admins. I'm pretty sure we have a storage. I know we have a storage admins group. If that's sufficient, then that's the group that will want to add permissions to be able to run the auditor.
To run the auditor. Okay.
And I think you're already in the storage admins group.
Okay.
I think.
I can check.
I mean, I could check, but we're on the video, so we can look at that afterwards. But basically, it's find a group that you think you want to run it as in the long term.
So off the top of my head, I can't think of tasks that could be done at the same time in parallel, but maybe, I mean, it was already merged in, but people could look at how the auditor works. On the way to work this morning, I just thought of one additional feature, which was a requirement that I don't know if I've implemented, which is if an image changes in GCR and it's what I call a child image of a fat manifest. So you know about fat manifests, and then you have like child images. It could be like 10. There's 10 different architectures. So if one of those child images gets pushed up first, which makes sense, that's how fat manifests are created. That means that the pub/sub message coming from GCR will say, you know, this child image, it's not going to say child image because it's not that smart. It will say, you know, this SHA was added to the registry. Now I need to check because it's not going to show up in our manifest, promoter manifests like text. Because people don't add the child images there. But I do already read the entire GCR state anyway. And in that like big data structure, there should be the child images there, I think.
That's a good point. As soon as we turn this live, you'll start getting alerts for everything because almost everything's manifests. So.
Yes. So that's one thing I need to just double check. But people can look at the code ahead of me if they want to. Please ping me. I will point them in the right direction.
Okay, sounds good. So about the new cluster AAA, I think that I'm currently working on checking how the things are going with monitoring. If we have some consensus, etc. Because for the last like a few weeks, I missed many things. But about the turning down the old GC Web soon, how the thing is going, Tim?
The old GCS Web is down. There is no more old GCS Web. The new cluster is live for that. The next steps were to do, I think somebody sent me a PR to start converting the k8s.io stuff. We created the namespaces. That one actually should be relatively easy. There's not a lot of state there, but I'll have to manually copy the old secret so we can make a clean transition. And there was a list of the other ones. We filed a separate issue for each of them before the holiday was up. And they all seem relatively approachable at this point. The RBAC stuff we know works. We still don't have monitoring and alerting, but I guess it's not really fair to raise the bar beyond where it already is. So I guess I'm not standing in the way of that progress anymore. Somebody else was also working on the promoter, not the promoter, the publisher, which is the only thing left running in that other dev2 cluster. And so I'd love to turn that off. I saw this yesterday that there's a bunch of PRs that were opened in the last 2 weeks, some of which I got through email, some of which I didn't. See my tweets about GitHub changing the way their emails work. But I will take a look at those PRs. I probably will not have a chance to until next week, honestly.
But that sounds good. I feel like there is a lot of progress. So that's very good to hear. And one of the last things is the Boscos Terraform, how the things are looking there. Because I don't see Dims on the call, but is there anyone who can tell us something about it? Nope. So let's move it for the next time. I will ask Deems and I will try to check how things are going there. And there is something about the streamlining accounts, and that would be a good thing to tell me what's this thing about, because I don't get exactly anything about it.
I don't know what that means either. Maybe I'll use that as a jumping off point though. I ran the auditor script just before the holidays, and a few things came to mind. One, the script was logging a whole lot of stuff that wasn't really useful for auditing purposes, so I sent some PRs and tidied that up a little bit. It's certainly not done. Second, because we didn't run it on a regular basis, it had a ton of changes that were very difficult to audit because there were so large of them. So I did a pass. I hope that I came up with, I didn't find anything that was glaringly obvious. If people want to contribute, it looks like it's a relatively sparse day today, but if there's something that people want to jump in and help on, the auditing script, running through each of the APIs and auditing the things that are important to audit for that API, producing usable, diffable output, would be an awesome place for people to contribute. I just in an hour of looking at it, identified 6 more hours of work to do at least. So if anybody's interested in that, we can add them to the auditors group, and you can actually start running that audit script, and it will dump all the IAM rules and everything across all of our projects. And we can get that into a state where the audit results are actually something we could look at in this group every 2 weeks and say, okay, we've created new project X and we've added group foo to role bar, etc.
Mm-hmm. I think that after this call, I will spend some time tomorrow and to create some email to our group with the thing what is happening right now, etc. So I will mention that topic there too. Maybe there will be somebody who can help. Okay, there is no topic. There are like open discussion topics here, and there is some topic from Mushloop about new accounts for image builder projects. Can you tell us more?
Hi, I'm Mushloop. So as part of the image builder project, there are kind of 2 distinct requirements. So the one is the ability to add end-to-end tests for building images, some of which requires nested virtualization, some of which requires different accounts, and we can probably get around some of those. And then the second requirement is to be able to publish those images. So initially this would be, I think Timothy St. Clair said he wanted a Cappy head and image builder head to kind of run on Kubernetes head, or a combination of those, so that you're testing the tips of each of those against each other. And then eventually getting to a stage where we can publish images to the community and take some of that workload off of existing sub-projects who are kind of duplicating the effort. So, so using an existing GCP, so we want named accounts for publishing. So if we're using AWS or GCP accounts, currently we would get a pool from Boscos, if I'm understanding it correctly. It would be a little bit harder to get access to a direct account and to limit others using Prowl to gain access to those accounts. So that's kind of why we can't use the existing accounts and why we would look to have new accounts.
Can I ask a couple of questions? Because I don't feel like I have all the context.
Sure.
Can you go back? Sorry, can you go back to the beginning? What exactly are we testing?
So these are, as part of the SIG cluster lifecycle, there's an image builder project. So at the moment, those images get built out of band and published from people's desktops and workstations.
Yes.
So we want to add end-to-end testing of those images. So if I have, so add pull request testing or nightly testing so that the images produced by Image Builder actually will run a Kubernetes version or versions.
So this is a two-level, the word image is such a vague term.
This is a VM image.
Gotcha. Okay.
Machine
So
image.
it's not the container image.
Yes, not container. I think we must actually rename it to something else because it is so confusing. But yes, these are VM machine images.
Okay. So the thing builds VM images, and you want to run some tests against those VM images, which you can obviously only do by spinning up VMs.
Well, and we can only build them by spinning up VMs as well. So,
why is that the case?
So if you wanted to, so for example, building images using nested virtualization, you can do that on GCP, but you need to create a custom image template, which if you're being spun into a different GCP account on every build is going to be quite slow. So we want to create one image template to host the nested virtualization host to be able to build images. That's on the GCP side, and then on the AWS side, for just building, we just need or any AWS account that we can use.
So the image build process is spin up a VM, configure it, take a snapshot?
So there's two kind of ways of doing it. There's that way, which is the Packer model, and then there's another model which uses QEMU and basically downloads a cloud image, spins that up locally using nested virtualization, configures it, and then creates an image out of that. So without requiring the cloud resources, but it does require nested virtualization. So there's two kind of different competing models at the moment.
Okay, because as far as I know, GCP doesn't support nested virtualization. So the only way that would work if you wanted to run the entire build would be to spin up a VM and take a snapshot.
So it does. You just need to create a custom image with a custom nested virtualization license and use that to spin up a VM. So it is actually a nifty feature that is supported. I don't think they want to support it, but it does. Like I have this running on a Google Cloud build, and it works.
Okay, well, that's something I didn't know. How about that? Okay, and so then thank you for that bootstrap. Now go back to the bit about needing different accounts.
Well, just I think a named account. So one account per provider. I don't know who handles the Azure ones, but we can probably talk to them directly. But just a named AWS account and a named GCP account that we can potentially maybe only give access to these specific jobs. So maybe run this on the trusted Prow cluster or something like that.
And so the jobs kick off from Prow?
At the moment, there aren't any jobs, but we can kick them off from Prow, or we can also use something like Google Cloud Build if Prow is too much of work.
So the pattern that we're following from the other staging projects with respect to container images, not VM images, is that we have a project for GCP calls them projects, Amazon calls them accounts. We have a separate GCP project for each staging effort. The staging project comes with a GCR registry and a GCS storage bucket, and could come with other things if we wanted to, which could include the ability to run VMs. But what happens today is we then link it via Prow. So Prow watches your source repo, changes to your source repo, trigger Prow, which does some logging stuff, and then triggers Cloud Build in your staging project. Your staging project does whatever your Cloud Build needs to do, and then publishes the images to that staging project. So I don't know how much of that maps exactly to VM images, but if you can describe the build step as a Cloud Build script, then you're already 3/4 of the way there. I think we'll need to figure out where we serve those images from, or if those are servable images, or if they're just disposable test results.
So it would just be, we can put it in the GCS bucket.
But are they permanent things, or are they just ephemeral, like we ran the test and here's the proof?
So for pull request, it would be, we ran the test and here's the proof, but based on tags, we'd want to start publishing some of those images at some point for consumption.
Okay, so we'd probably want to do something very akin to the promoter process that we're working on for images. Justin, who I don't believe is here, wants to do the same promoter process for arbitrary staging bucket artifacts. So maybe that covers this. The idea being, again, that we have one true prod or some number of true prod buckets, and only a bot touches those. And as a human, you file a YAML pull request that says, take this thing out of my staging repo and promote it to the production repo, and the bot would do that for you. Does that sound like, am I getting close?
Yep, that's exactly what we'd want in the later stages. I think for now we can start with a Google Cloud build and ephemeral images or ephemeral objects. So it would just be a Google Cloud build project that then spins up VMs.
Okay. So yeah, if you can, I think step one would be, if you can describe this in terms of a Google Cloud build step, then we can link that build step to a repo and pull requests or commits to that repository.
Cool. And which project should I file this under?
If you, all the cluster API efforts already have staging projects. So that's where I would say we should start doing the work. You probably will need some extra amount of permissions in order to make sure that this works. I don't know what those permissions would be. Where are you doing it today?
So there's a GitHub repo for this,
Okay.
and that's about as much infra as we have at the moment.
Got it. Okay. So we have two options. One, we can follow both branches simultaneously. I would say go start with the staging repos that are already existing for the cluster API. There's probably a half dozen of them for the different providers. See if there's enough permissions already. My guess is there's probably not, and you're going to run into a brick wall that says, you know, you need access to the compute API or something like that. And then we can talk about how we govern that. The other side of it would be, we could throw up a new temporary project, let you go prototype within that project, and then backtrack from that to what the minimum permissions are. In my experience, it's harder to figure out the minimum set than it is to run into the brick walls over and over again and drill through them.
I'm happy to do it either way.
So, okay, then given my druthers, I would say start with the cluster API projects. If you don't have access to those already, you can add yourself to the appropriate groups in groups.yaml.
Okay.
You know where that is? Sorry, I'm being very vague, like you're new to the group. Groups.yaml is in a subdirectory called groups under the k8s.io repo.
Okay, I'll find it there and I'll add myself there if I'm not there already.
And
Awesome.
feel free to ask on the Slack channel if you couldn't find it or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're around. This week for me is a little chaotic, first week of the year, but as the first week dies out, we'll have more time to help figure this out.
Yeah, and feel free to write to me even privately. I can help.
Cool. Thank you very much.
No worries. Okay, so this is the last question which is written in the document. Is any other topic which we want to mention today? Okay, I'm asking for the first time.
Yeah, so one thing that still is something that is like a preventative thing is the retention rates. So we have a retention of 60 days on staging storage and staging GCP storage, which was sort of arbitrarily done. and there's two things which might be nice to like get focused first before we go production on the image promoter. One is the retention for staging images. Currently, we don't have anything, so we don't clean them up. So it's basically retention forever. So we might not want to do that because it might lead to people using staging images instead of the production images. And as the second thing is the test cluster, or the tests basically might get pushed into a specific storage bucket, which might need to be around longer. Basically all the logs from the tests where the retention of 60 days was sort of asked to be lifted, or at least not be added, if that makes sense.
So let's be clear, there's a difference between, unfortunately, the words are very confusing. There's a difference between retention, which means the minimum amount of time you must keep it, and life cycle, which lets you configure the maximum amount of time before I automatically delete it. For production, we set the retention to 10 years. So anything that gets uploaded to production will stick around for 10 years. Put a little asterisk on that because I'll come right back to it. And we set no life cycle. We don't auto-delete anything from production. For staging, I agree we sort of want to delete them after a certain amount of time. Here's going back to that asterisk. GCR doesn't support life cycle for images yet. Now, GCR happens to be built on GCS, and GCS does support lifecycle, so I can go ahead and put that in place. And in fact, it kind of works. It deletes the image blob, but it doesn't delete the image header. The image header is stored separately. So if you list the images, it'll still be there, but if you try to pull it, it won't work, which is kind of not helpful. So I actually reached out to the GCR team and I asked them, like, hey, like, are you willing to support this? Like, can you promise me that this will work into the future? And they said no. So they reserve the right to change the implementation around GCR. So we don't currently have a knob to control lifecycle of images.
Yeah,
that's the.
Yeah. So on the staging image, the first thing probably keeping it away from the implementation of what we can do is at least document what might be done in the future, like set a specific time frame so that the expectations are set, and then see what we can do. Does
Sure.
that make sense?
Yes.
So there's an open issue. I linked it in the docs. It also mentions that you can do that on the Google side, basically, or the Google Cloud side, but not on the GCR side. Does that make sense?
Right.
As you mentioned.
Yes.
And the other one I'm still looking up is on the test logs. If you want to keep the logs longer than 60 days, something was mentioned like half a year, or is that something that we want to keep even longer, especially because we might want to compare testing outputs between major versions or something.
Yeah. Which test logs are these?
Test grid ones.
And where are we storing those? Do we have a separate bucket for those somewhere?
The plan is to have a separate bucket, I think.
Oh, sure. I would consider those to be prod logs and set the retention to 10 years. There's no reason to delete them that I can think of.
Yeah, so I think where it came up was they might just use the normal staging buckets, which do have a retention rate. So if they're in the normal GCS buckets through our normal process, they would run into the 60-day retention problem.
If these are real test log, like staging is supposed to be ephemeral, so I wouldn't use staging for this.
Okay.
We can come up with a better way of doing it. If these are things we want to keep for real, it's more prod-like than staging-like. Although that distinction is getting blurrier as time goes on, so we need to refactor some of that. But in the terms that we have today, I'd say this is more prod-like, and I would be happy to create a separate prod bucket or separate prod project or something that has a more customized policy for this.
Okay, I'll document that. But do we have an agreement on retention or life cycle in general? Like, I would say retention because that's the maximum amount of time someone can expect it. Life cycle is something else.
Yeah.
Which isn't that important for the end user.
So I'm happy to change or set retention for staging stuff if we think it's useful. I'm happy to fiddle with numbers and move it from 30 days to 6 months if we need to. In the end, I want as much automation around cleanup as possible so that we don't end up with a bill where we're looking at going, well, I don't know, do we need these?
Okay, so general agreement is do have retention on staging GCR images, and 60 days might be a good start, even if it's arbitrary.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I remember in a meeting with the GCR team, and I was concerned about storage costs, and they were saying that storage costs are mostly negligible. It's all about like network traffic.
Yeah, it's true. And honestly, keeping things forever in storage is not a huge deal. Other than it gets confusing as to whether people can rely on them to be there forever. I feel like somewhere between 0 and 1 year, there's a threshold which effectively becomes permanent, right? So if we have a policy that like 6 months these things go away, then people will stop relying on them. But if we keep them around for a year, we might as well keep them forever.
Yeah, I agree. The question is 6 months already too long for people to maybe rely on them? Especially because staging images might be like the more updated ones.
If we, 2 stages, 6 months is 2 releases on the current cadence. I'm okay with that. I don't think that's egregious. It feels a little on the long side, but if we think that diffing between 2 major releases is useful, then that's fine. Honestly, if you haven't promoted something out of a staging repo within 6 months, you probably don't need it.
But wouldn't before we jump to production, I would probably advocate for setting the retention as lowest as possible, because increasing is always better than breaking someone that is relying on the set retention.
Sure.
So I would go with 30 or 60 days, because that feels like in a normal dev cycle, why would you have something that is not pushed to production, to the production bucket yet, or to the production GCR yet?
Well, and just let me be devil's advocate. What are we protecting against in putting a retention on staging? Mostly staging is operated on by humans. So are we afraid that humans are going to come through and do something dirty and then try to clean up their own mess? Or
so we had one issue with Docker Hub still having images which weren't updated for more than 2 years, including the pause image, which was used in I think VMware testing infrastructure, and we completely broke them just by removing a pause image. And because they relied on them being there, if we had a retention rate, at least of the expectation of 30 days, that might have not happened.
I don't see how those 2 things link. Like, just to draw the analogy, the Docker Hub was a prod-like repo that somebody was assuming was still alive, and it really wasn't, but we don't have a good way to advertise that, nor do we have any sort of retention policy on it. That's not a staging repo. It was never a staging repo. Staging repos explicitly say -staging or staging dash or something like that. So if you're going to production and your tests say k8s staging cluster API, you're wrong in the head.
True, but like being wrong in the head and making sure that expectations are set, 2 different things. Like I remember that some etcd-like service internally was too fault tolerant that everybody was using it. So there might have been introduced errors to like remove that hurdle, or to set the expectation that it's not a reliable service overall.
So sorry, I just realized I'm already 15 minutes late for my next meeting. I'm happy to discuss. I'm not as convinced as I might be, but it's not also a huge deal. With the caveat that I can't actually do anything about it for container images. So the example that you used is kind of moot anyway, because retention doesn't actually work. So let's take it to Slack or something.
Yeah, I'll open the issues or link it in the docs.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, folks, I have to drop off.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Tim. See you later. Okay, so is there any other topic we want to discuss at today's meeting? We have like 15 minutes left. Okay, for the first time, the second, and the third. Okay, so let's finish our today's call. Thank you all for being here. James, thank you very much for taking notes, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks very much, Bart.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.